All right, so my presentation is political news bias and why. Ways that affects the society. I mean, first of all, like having bias is not bad. It's perfectly fine because we all obviously need bias to form our opinion, but it does affect us in ways like in the media. Like if it's just going one way, you form an opinion in just one-sided arguments, and so that just affects us and ultimately like pulls us apart. And yeah. And it doesn't depend, it just depends on like who's in office. Like right now we have President Trump, he's a Republican, so obviously the news is gonna be more like against him, to form opinions against him. And like with Obama, he was a Democrat and so Republicans were against him. So it just depends on who's in office. So one side of the argument is Democrats. This is just under the current president, so I mean obviously the media is more liberal left or moderate liberal. So the Democrats have the media with them and trying to ultimately like hurt Donald Trump by making stories to fit their agenda and their policies and what they believe. And then Republicans, like with Trump in office right now, they feel like publicly attacked by the media. And it's also like, I'll share later, but it's just like due to the amount of liberal reporters and moderate liberal reporters, and also because of the upcoming election of 2020. So the research shows, a recent poll showed that 60% of journalists were identified liberal or moderate to liberal, and then 30% of journalists were identified as moderate, and only 9% were conservative, and a whopping 89% voted for Hilary Clinton in the 2016 election. During the election, it showed that 60 to 80% of the news was reported negative, like against Donald Trump, and actually towards all candidates too. So, yeah, and then also it showed that during Trump's first 100 days, that the negative bias was reported to be between 52 and all the way up to 93%. And I have a video.
I want to talk about the presidential race and then the first 100 days. The coverage of both major candidates was incredibly negative. 62% of the time for Hillary, it was negative. 56% of the time for Trump, it was negative. You point out that there was not a single week when it reached into positive territory. Explain.
Well, I think the bias of the press is a negative bias. And, I think the reason that Tucker Carlson didn't like our first study is that it showed that Hilary Clinton had more negative coverage than Donald Trump during the election. But the point was that, the press, when it looks at the political world, picks up what's going wrong rather than what's going right. If you look at the last 8 presidential elections and look at the coverage of the presidential nominees, there's only one of those nominees who received, on balance, positive coverage during the general election, and that was Barack Obama in 2008.
I have a graph that displays what you just referenced. We'll put that up on the screen. I guess the question is, if it's been negative since 1984, are the candidates to blame? Is it their messaging, or is the media looking to pick at that scab?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both going on here. I do think that Watergate and Vietnam changed the relationship between the politician and the press, and the press ever since has been more critical in its perspective on politics. At the same time, we have this polarization, and you have that wonderful tape out of Montana about people's reaction to the body slam, and you can see that we are polarized, and a lot of that's working its way into our political discourse. So it's more negative, but the press is really concentrating on what's going wrong.
Professor, we love to claim that we yearn for more substance. There's a pie chart in your analysis of the 2016 election which says that the coverage was 42% in the 2016 race about the horse race nature of this. Only 10% of the coverage was on policy. Do we really want policy coverage, or do we just say that?
Alright, so I think that's like, kind of gives explains us, like, I mean, it's not just like unfair to everybody, like it's, all the news is just biased and negative. And so I guess what I'm trying to get across is just like, why is all the news biased and negative? And like, why can't we focus on the positives? And also, like, look at both sides of the argument. So I think if we look at both sides of the argument, and here, there's like a graphic. I don't know if you can really see, but it shows like all the news sources. But I think if we like try to focus on and work on like looking at both sides, like, I mean, you have Fox News on the right, CNN on the left, and then you have your like neutral sources. So if you look at both sides, like Fox News, CNN, and then like neutral sources, I think if we base our opinions off that, we'll ultimately be like, we'll like be able to kind of see in the same way and not be so either way far left or way far right. And yeah, that just goes along with my opinion. That's also like my solution too, is just when we're looking at news, just like pull from both sides. And this chart is like actually a really good representation of like what news, like you have InfoWars far right, and then all these sources over here that are far left. But yeah, that's, and then yeah, that's, we're excited.
I think that they also do that like among their own nominees, because I was watching the Democratic like debate, and Andrew Yang completely destroyed Elizabeth Warren, but at the same time Elizabeth Warren gets way more news coverage, and it's just it's dumb and it's unfair.
Yeah. Either one. Haley?
Okay. Do you think like social media, because you said like social media is more liberal, do you think like news tends to be more conservative, but social media tends to be more liberal? Does that make sense? Like the different kind of reports? Or do you think it like it kind of just plays an equal part?
Well, I would say like the news is like what I said, like, I mean, like 70, or I think it was like 63% of reporters are liberal, so I would say news is more,
So you just feel like
it's just
all
kind of
more
under the
liberal?
current president. Like, I mean, when Obama was president, I'm sure the news was more right, like Republican, trying to like get his views away from Obama. But then like under the current president Trump, I mean, I'm just assuming that, and under the journalism, but yeah. And then,
Sorry. Do you think like stations or like political figures who like lie or like say like inaccurate information should be like punished?
yes and no, but I mean, like the thing about America is we have our freedom to like speak, but like, I mean, I guess if you are saying like telling lies about someone or giving like the wrong information, I think yes. But I mean, it shouldn't be like you go to prison for like 30 years or something like that, you know? But yeah.
Okay, last card for today, please pass them over to our